On 3rd and 3, they protect Brady. Scans the field and lets it fly. It's Evans. It's a touchdown.
This is the Big Nasty. Yeah, Big Nasty. Hall of Fame Tampa Bay Buccaneer fan, baby.
This is Mike Allstott, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you're listening to the Cannon Fire Podcast.
Cannon Fire Podcast, brother. You ain't listening, and you're missing out. Woo! And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. Happy Victory Monday to you. I am your host, Rhett Matthew, joined alongside me, as always, my good buddy and co-host from BucsNation.com, Mr. Evan Wanish. Also joining us today, former Tampa Bay Buccaneers quarterback, Coach Shaun King. Pleasure to have you back, rocking the Victory Monday mug. How about those Bucs, man? 20-10 over the New Orleans Saints. The defense dominating. I mean, just an absolute, one of the best stat lines we have seen from this Todd Bowles-led defense in quite some time. They were able to score the Mike Edwards pick six to kind of put a wrap on things, but they forced 5 turnovers in the second half of that game, which really got kickstarted after that big brawl in the middle. So one hell of a game in New Orleans that we're still kind of reeling from. But Shaun, what were your thoughts on that week 2 performance?
Well, I think when you come into any season, you have certain expectations, or you kind of formulate an opinion of what this is going to look like, and just pleasantly surprised. I mean, the defense looks like best in the league caliber. I mean, they completely shut down Dallas, and that was with Dak. And the demise of the Dallas Cowboys looks like it was exaggerated as they went in week 2 and beat the Bengals. So that win looks more impressive. And then they really stifled a super talented Saints offense. I know Kamara did not play, but I mean, they have a great collection of wide receivers, and a combination of pass rush and coverage. I mean, they had Jameis out of sync. They've been phenomenal, and I expected them to be good, but not this good.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way of expecting them to be good. I thought, when we did our season prediction show, I said that I thought the defense was going to be ahead of the offense in terms of mixing in those pieces, because the defense, it's relatively the same defense, and it's been that way for a few years. So I figured they'd be more comfortable with themselves. The offense is trying to work in some new pieces. But you're right, Shaun. I agree with you. I didn't expect them to be quite this good. The amount of takeaways they were able to get and the pressure that they're able to get as well. So that was a concern I had coming into the year, if they were going to be able to keep up that pressure, not having Ndamukong Suh, not having Jason Pierre-Paul. But it looks like they haven't missed a beat. And I mean, guys like Devin White are developing well. Jamel Dean is stepping up in the secondary. It all seems to be coming together quite well for this Bucs defense.
Now, let me ask a question, and Shaun, I want your take on this as well. Sean Murphy-Bunting, we had mentioned it briefly on the post-game show last night, but for the second week in a row, he gets 0 defensive snaps. And we know he struggled with injury back in 2021, missed damn near half the regular season before he finally made his return in a scrambled backfield. But he hasn't seen the field at all. And the fact of the matter is, the Buccaneers defense is humming. This secondary is putting in work. The new 3-safety look the Buccaneers have had really seems to be working well. Antoine Winfield playing some of his best football out of the nickel position, moving all over the field. What's going on with SMB? Is there any chance he can work his way back into this roster? Because right now, it's kind of like riding the hot hand with any other position. You almost don't want to, mess this thing up with how well it's been working early on in the season.
I think you kind of alluded to it. They've been playing Ryan and Edwards at the safety spots and letting Winfield play the nickel. If you think about Sean Murphy, second-round pick out of Central Michigan, expected to be, a outside corner, never really developed as an edge player on defense. He really kind of blossomed when they moved him into that nickel spot. And when he got injured, I just think they got comfortable with Winfield. And I think he's probably gives them a little more from a blitz standpoint, from a physicality standpoint. So I'm sure Coach Kevin is telling him, don't get frustrated, keep working hard. Your time's going to come. It's a good problem to have, to be able to say we're playing elite level of defense and still have guys like Sean Murphy-Bunting that we're waiting to contribute.
Yeah, I agree. You don't really want to rock the boat anyway, because, I mean, the defense has played so well. If you need a spark plug, maybe that's where and come off the bench and kind of be that spark plug for you. But right now, there's no reason for him to be out there. Like the defense is playing outstanding. So, and if he's contributing on special teams now. So they've been looking for special teams contributors. So it's not like he's doing absolutely nothing. Of course, you would, second round pick, you'd like to see him be able to contribute on a defense in some way. But I mean, Jamel Dean has been fantastic. So it's not like Jamel Dean's job as that number 2 corner is in any danger. And Carlton Davis is Carlton Davis. So there's not really a spot for him right now. And like you said, Sean, it's a good problem to have. It's not an unfortunate thing. It's an unfortunate thing for SMB personally, but in terms of the team, it shows that they have the depth now and they have the talent on the defensive side to hold a former second round pick basically on the bench for the entire game.
Now, is this a guy where at any point this year he holds a little bit of value to some other teams who may be hungry for depth in their secondary?
I just don't see the Bucs being in a. Why would they?
If you have them sitting there, why deal them when depth has been an issue before?
Yeah, you've seen all the injuries in the secondary last year. I don't think the Bucs want. I mean, it would be for a draft pick. Like, I don't see why the Bucs. Now, I mean, maybe if you do a player swap, those are rare at the deadline. Like player for player swaps are pretty rare at the deadline. But if you could find a player to help you, maybe. But I wouldn't expect it.
So let's get to the main event here, the talk of the town. The biggest thing coming out of this game, aside from the Buccaneers beating the Saints in the regular season for the first time in over 4 years, Mike Evans was suspended by the NFL for 1 game for his role in that big altercation between the Buccaneers and New Orleans. Mike is planning to appeal, so his status for week 3 still kind of up in the air. He could play if that appeal process ends up dragging out like it normally feels like it does in the NFL. But what do you make of this? I mean, Sean, I wanted your opinion on this. Mike Evans going to bat for his quarterback, going to bat for his teammates. And, that's exactly what we got in a pretty aggressive fashion. Some people like it. Some people said it was uncalled for. But what we know for sure is that this beef with him and Marshon Lattimore is pretty damn personal.
Yeah, 2 light-skinned guys trying to show they're tough. It's funny. I never liked it because, football is a violent, physical game. You generally get 60-plus snaps where in between the whistle, you're paid to physically make another human do what they don't want to do. So I always come on, fellas, really. But it was entertaining for TV, and from a motivational standpoint, it looked like it sparked the team, especially on offense because, we've been talking a lot about the Bucs defense. Saints defense was going series for series with them for the majority of this game. So that kind of ignited, I guess, a new energy outburst, I guess you could call it, and we kind of made a couple plays and created some separation and ultimately got the win. Because of the other injuries at receiver, though, you got to ask yourself, if you're Mike Evans, if the suspension is upheld, was it worth it? Our missing Chris Godwin, Julio didn't play, So, the position seemed really deep at one time. It's getting thin, by the minute. You could tell, like, Brady's getting frustrated. Some of those plays that normally would have been to Gronkowski or Chris Godwin, Scotty Miller wasn't able to make, So we got to figure out how, especially on offense, to create some consistency. If it could go wrong injury-wise on offense, outside of the fact that Brady's still standing upright, it seems like it's went wrong.
Yeah, and the fight, look, to me, we talked about it on our post-game review show, and we kind of compared it to like a hockey thing about how, you start a brawl in hockey and, it's going to energize a bench and it's going to get the guys moving. And it did that for the Bucs. This was the drives to end the game after the fight happened. The Saints received the ball. Winston was picked off. Then the next drive, the Bucs scored a touchdown. The next Saints drive, Winston was picked off. The next Bucs drive, Ryan Suckup kicked the field goal. Then after that, the next Saints drive was the Mike Edwards, pick 6. And then after that was the Saints touchdown. And then the Bucs punted, and then there was the fumble, and then the Bucs punted again. Saints didn't convert on 4th down, and the game was over. So the following drives after that fight was for the Saints, for the Bucs, an interception, touchdown, interception, field goal, pick 6. Like, yeah, that absolutely to me changed the game, and you could tell the Bucs were just playing with more energy, and I think it's we talked about with hockey. It's gonna energize one side. You just hope that it's the right side, and in this case, it did energize it. Because I mean, me and Rhett talked about it. You know, when it was happening, Rhett was kind of thinking, you know, here we go again, because the Saints had a reputation for getting in the Bucs' heads and making the Bucs do uncharacteristic things, be undisciplined, and that was a pure sign of that right there. You're like, oh yeah, here we go again, but they were able to rebound from it, and they were able to be mentally tough and rebound from that and be able to win the games. At the time, it was still a 3-3 game. It was not like the Bucs didn't have the lead or anything. It was still a tie game, so that really changed the whole outcome of the game to me.
I thought that was the biggest thing I took away from it, was the fact that the Buccaneers were able to just come out on top after that, because there have been boiling points in these games before. They always play chippy against New Orleans. It always gets a little bit heated. Every now and again, there's some pushing and some shoving. But it seems like, as far as the mental battle goes, once that point boils over and guys are pushing and shoving each other on the field, that's when the Bucs would usually check out, lose the mental battle, and in turn lose the football game. But just like you said, Evan, they're able to overcome it, and they kind of cleanse some demons out there in New Orleans. You know what I mean? They are 0-7 against this club the last time they had played them in the regular season before this week. So good to see the Buccaneers come out here with a win. And I will say that to beat a team like New Orleans in a game like that, a game that was already frustrating. In the first half, you see Tom Brady breaking Microsoft tablets. Usually it takes them about 3.5 quarters to get to that point. But they overcome that. They get a win against a team they've been trying to beat forever. And now they play Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, who they should already feel confident going into this game, because Aaron Rodgers has not played well against Tampa Bay, especially since Tom Brady has come to town. But what a confidence boost for this team to finally go out there and beat New Orleans in the fashion that they did. I mean, for this team to be 2-0 right now, you got to feel pretty good about their chances, even without potentially Mike Evans coming into this week 3 game against Green Bay.
Well, definitely defensively, they look like they're capable of stopping or slowing down anyone. Then, with Green Bay's wide receiver situation, where they're still trying to figure some experience for some younger players like Romeo Dubs and Christian Watson. I mean, they're going to have the advantages. Green Bay has been running the football better, and that is Aaron Rodgers. So, he's capable on any given Sunday of breaking your heart. If you look outside of just the Bucs, it happened across the board in other locations. So I was never comfortable in the game because I saw what was going on around the league, and it seemed like a bunch of games that looked like blowouts at halftime all of a sudden were life and death in the final 2 minutes. But Tampa should be favored. I was trying to look up to see what that opening line was.
Last I checked, I thought the Bucs were favored by 3. It could have changed, but I thought, and maybe the Mike Evans news changes some things, but I thought the Bucs were favored by 3.
Yeah, I got them 2.5, so maybe the Mike Evans, move changes. So the odds makers are saying it's a 50-50 game. Generally, when they feel like that, the home team gets 3 points. So it'll be a good test. I'm sure the fan base has got to be fired up. I was trying to think back the last few years. I don't remember us starting the season with 2 away games. Definitely not since Brady has been the quarterback there in Tampa. So I'm sure people will be fired up, get the tailgating going. I remember when I got drafted and the Bucs were still in the NFC Central. And the home game that we were guaranteed to sell out so it'd be shown on local TV was the Packers. Because their fan base used to basically turn it into Green Bay South. So times have changed now. I mean, that's not the case anymore, but it's just a fun little run down memory lane back into the old black and blue division.
We talk about the Bucs sort of exercising their demons against the Saints. The Packers have some demons against this Bucs team, and the Packers are going to be looking to exercise those demons against this Bucs team. But to me, the Packers haven't looked overly impressive. Like, even in their win last night against Chicago, they didn't look overly impressive to me. Obviously, they did what they had to do. They won the football game, but I don't think Chicago is a very good team, and the Packers didn't overpower them. So I do think there is a chance for for the Bucs to exploit some of the weaknesses the Packers have, like you said, Sean, trying to work in those new wide receivers. It seems like Rodgers is also frustrated. It just Rodgers and Brady are two different guys. Brady shows more visible frustration. Rodgers, you can just kind of tell. It's like he's frustrated, but like he's kind of not gonna say it.
More of a passive aggressiveness.
Yeah,
He's not
yeah,
breaking tablets on
yeah.
So Brady acts out, as the old folks used to say, and Rodgers pouts.
Yeah. Yeah, so like, and Rodgers has had his frustrations with the offense, but Green Bay's played solid defense. I think it is going to be a good game, and to be able to the last time I believe the Bucs had two straight road games was in 2016, and the only reason because of that was because Raymond James Stadium was getting some renovations done, so they had to be on the road 2 straight weeks. But yeah, they're 2-0 now after, and I talked about it on I believe on the Saints preview show of what a confidence boost it could be if this team were to go into New Orleans and beat the Saints, a team that they haven't beaten in 4 years in the regular season, to and then play the Packers and Chiefs. That would be a heck of a confidence boost, and now they got it. So hopefully, there is no letdown. They might be without Mike Evans on Sunday, which would certainly make things harder. We don't know the status of Chris Godwin or Julio Jones or anything yet. It's a little too early for that stuff, but I do think it's going to be a good game, and hopefully the Bucs defense can again sort of haunt Aaron Rodgers as they have the past 2 times they've played.
When we talk about Green Bay's offense, we talk a lot about Aaron Rodgers. Of course, that young wide receiver room. Shout out to Christian Watson, who, while honestly hasn't been super awesome this year, he's got more lowlights than highlights. Tampa, Florida, Plant High School, going out there putting on. Also, just, I don't know if you saw that stat release last week, but Tampa, Florida, I think the second most represented city as far as players in the NFL go, active starting players in the NFL. They've got 15 players. One of them is an old teammate of mine, Isaiah Rodgers in Indianapolis, playing returner, playing corner. That guy is a stud. You love to see that. Florida has certainly been football university as far as the talent that comes out of here, because Bradenton, Florida, while I know most of those were IMG guys who aren't actually from this area, Bradenton still had 15 or 16 players as well. So when you got over 30 players in the NFL and Texas only has 20 something, that's a pretty good feeling. But going back to this Green Bay offense, we talk a lot about the young wide receivers, still trying to get things going with them, but the running backs, I know you said that they didn't really dominate Chicago, but I thought the running back committee they have back there could certainly give the Bucs problems, because we talk about all the strengths that they have shown early on this 2022 campaign. The run defense has been a little bit more leaky than I would like it to be, especially after, the status they have garnered for themselves over the last 3 seasons or so.
I agree. Packers ran the ball well last night. That was probably the big reason they won the game. Rodgers didn't go berserk, throwing for 300, 400 yards. They ran the ball efficiently, and I mean, they were getting 5 to 6 yards a pop. And yeah, the Bucs are gonna have to watch out for that. The Saints, I thought, ran the ball well against the Bucs, and I had mentioned that before the Saints game. I was a little bit concerned about that. You just got to hope that the Packers kind of get set in their ways and they want to pass a little bit more. It's starting to the defense starting to turn a little bit, right? They're becoming better against the pass, but a bit worse against the run, which honestly, in today's NFL, I'll take, because most offenses are going to be pass heavy most of the time nowadays. It's just how the NFL is nowadays. So, but yeah, I expect to see a heavy dose of Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon on Sunday, because it worked for Green Bay last night. And I think Green Bay knows that they can't have Rodgers go out there and throw the ball 40, 45 times, because they almost did that versus Minnesota, and you saw it didn't really work. So Rodgers has had trouble against this team. I think one way the Packers could look to limit that trouble and limit the turnovers is run the football. So I think the Bucs definitely do have to. It hasn't been terrible, but like you said, the standard that they've set for themselves, it needs to be much better than it has been.
I think week 1 Dallas put up a little over 75 yards with 3 runners on the night, and I think New Orleans had a very similar stat line. Regardless of the number they put up, there was a period in the game, second half of yesterday, where Mark Ingram kind of got hot at the wrong time, and he was really driving them down the field. Luckily, it ended up in a turnover. I think that was the Logan Ryan peanut punch to force the fumble. But, I mean, they were cooking with the run game. Mark Ingram, no stranger to tearing up the Buccaneers. So they got to be ready for some more formidable backs. And Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, those guys can certainly get the job done.
Yeah, and I think you just see a transformation happening in Green Bay. And it periodically happens, within organizations based on where they're at with the salary cap. For a long time, all of Green Bay's major transactions, whether they be draft or free agency, were centered around the offense, for a while. And you see that shifting. I know Rodgers got the big extension, but other than that, from an asset allocation standpoint, it's been on defense. Like, they think they have put together a pretty salty defense. Like, you talk to people, inside the organization, they think it's as good as the Packer defense has been in years. So they are kind of trying to convince Rodgers to transition to more of a run-centric offense that kind of caters to field position, time of possession, more complementary football, less 3-and-outs, but also a lot less explosive. So, a guy that's won NFL MVP 3 times, telling him to basically sacrifice, it takes time, for you to get full buy-in. So, you mentioned that they didn't look that impressive against Chicago. It's kind of because we're used to seeing them be explosive and dynamic in the pass game. So, they're transitioning. It's going to be a good matchup, man. I think this is two of the better defenses, in the NFC specifically, and definitely you probably say top 1-2 quarterbacks in whatever order, depending on whose ever opinion it is in the NFC overall.
Yeah, and I think this game, and this will probably be one of the last things we'll say about the Green Bay matchup in particular. We got a full week to analyze it, but this could be a big game in terms of the seeding in the NFC. Obviously, you can't be the 1 seed in week 3, but down the road, you could look at this game and potentially look at it and say, wow, that was a big win. The Bucs being able to beat the Packers, go to 3-0, drop the Packers to 1-2, the Bucs could be in the driver's seat for the NFC's 1 seed. The Rams almost blew that game to Atlanta yesterday, being up 28-3. I thought Atlanta was gonna exercise some demons there themselves.
Everybody made the joke. They had them right where they wanted them at their 28-3.
Just that's the name of the game. And the Rams haven't looked overly impressive. The 49ers, now they have Jimmy G back. I think Trey Lance's potential is good, but I think for this year's team, Jimmy G's better. But still, San Francisco can be beaten. Philly, I think Philly's roster is really good, but we still don't know. They have an unproven quarterback. There could be an opportunity here for the Bucs to almost have a stranglehold on that NFC 1 seed right now, early out of the gate, if they were able to beat this Green Bay team, because I think going into the year, you could all agree, the 3 teams it was going to be for that 1 seed would be Tampa, Green Bay, or LA. Now, you can throw Philly into the mix a little bit, maybe in Minnesota if Minnesota were to beat Philly tonight. But I think this game, Tampa versus Green Bay, could have huge implications down the line in week 16, week 17 that you're not really feeling right now.
Well, Evan, I tell you this, if the playoffs started today, I'm looking at it right here. Bucs 1 seed, Giants 2 seed, baby.
Giants. just like we all predicted, just like we all picked.
With Vikings, Eagles, that'll be a good game tonight. Monday Night Football. Getting to see some of the potential playoff competition. At least the way it's looking. Early in the season.
So we got 2 Monday Night Football games tonight, which I'm really not that big a fan of. I don't know I get it. More football is more football, but on a Monday night, I want to watch one game at a time. I don't want to have to switch between the 2 games.
Yeah. I was gonna say I don't like the way they stagger the starts.
That's the issue. They always used to do the East Coast game, and then they used to do the West Coast game at 10:45. But now, you're gonna be able to watch Bills Titans for an hour, but then the Eagles Vikings game gonna start. That doesn't make much sense. They should have done Bills Titans as the East Coast game, and then they should have done a West Coast game starting at 11 or something.
Yeah.
And isn't ESPN and ABC under both? Aren't they both under Disney?
I think so. Yeah.
So it's not even competitive. Programming. It's
they're
the same
taking
company
away from each other.
Yeah, usurping, internally. So I don't know why they don't start the East Coast game at 6 East Coast, and then the West Coast games start at 6 Pacific.
Mm-hmm.
So that way it's a 3-hour window. And if the first game runs, 3:15 or something, you miss a little bit of the second game, but you get to see the majority of it.
So I got the answer to everybody's question here from SI.com. Why is there a Monday Night Football doubleheader in week 2? And the simple answer is this. Because ESPN wanted to find a reason to show off their $165 million studio setup on TV. So Steve Levy, Louis Riddick, and Dan Orlovsky will call Tennessee Buffalo tonight on ESPN. And then Joe Buck and Troy Aikman are going to be doing the NFC battle between Minnesota and Philly on ABC. ESPN has said it will liberally use double boxes on both networks during the overlap to keep viewers updated on both matchups. So why exactly are we getting a doubleheader in week 2? As for this season, ESPN wanted to switch up this year's doubleheader from week 1 to 2, in part because it wanted to showcase its new $165 million booth in the season openers. After years of trying to stabilize the Monday Night Football broadcast team, ESPN stole Buck and Aikman away from Fox, where they called games together for 20 seasons, and instantly solved all of its Monday Night Football announcer issues. So there is the inside and out as to why we have this weird doubleheader, courtesy of SI.com.
I mean, if you paid $175 million for something, I think you'd want to show it off too.
Oh yeah, I'd want it to be, first on the billing, and that's exactly what they're doing.
And bringing it back to the Bucs here before we wrap it up with a few more things, I want to talk about Tom Brady, who is probably going to be in the Fox booth sooner rather than later, right? Probably next year, I would assume. But I thought, a lot of people were saying that, Tom Brady didn't play great. I thought he was fine. It wasn't great. He wasn't bad. But I think people forget fits this Saints defense gives Tom Brady. They're still really good. I know they lost a lot of pieces in the offseason, but they're still a really good defense. It's a tough environment, and I thought Brady did his job. The biggest thing, obviously, the fumble sucked, but 0 interceptions. That was the key to the entire game. We knew that. I thought whoever was going to generate the most turnovers was going to win. If the Bucs couldn't take care of the football, they weren't going to win, and they haven't been able to take care of the football against the Saints team. That's why they haven't won since 2018. So I thought if they took care of the football, they could have a decent chance, and that's what they did for the most part. How did you evaluate Brady's day on Sunday, Sean?
I think Brady's frustrated, but they're winning. So what can he say? You know what I mean? I was pulling his numbers up right here. I mean, you're talking about a guy at 45 that threw for last year 5,000 yards, 45 touchdowns. I mean, he's thrown for right at 200 yards per game through the first 2 weeks, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. So this is the transition you get when you go from a Bruce Arians, who's an aggressive offensive guy. Bruce wants to push the ball down the field, be aggressive, take chances, to a conservative defensive guy in Todd Bowles, who wants to not turn the ball over, play field position. And you can see the image shift. I add in that, in a lot of ways, Tom is going through the same thing Aaron's going. Gronk has been his Devontae Adams. That guy that you can rely on. There's like this organic chemistry, when it's chaos around, like you guys have your hand signals and your mannerisms that tell the other one exactly what you're looking for, what's to be expected. And, he doesn't have that. Then you could see him and Chris Godwin had really developed like this kinship, and this understanding, kind of how to navigate zone and man defenses, in between the numbers. And all of a sudden, Chris Godwin isn't there, and he can tell he's frustrated with some of the younger receivers and, them not making some of the plays or being in some of the positions that they should be, based on how he's seeing unfold. So, he's hiding it well at times. At other times, he's not hiding it well. I'm sure whenever they lose, if they lose, he'll get a little chirpy, because he's a perfectionist. He wants it to be perfect. And the Bucs passing game right now is still a work in progress. And he's frustrated about that. And, Mike Evans not being available probably, just accents it even more. So it's gonna be an interesting first quarter of the season. But I think you got to figure out from year to year, guys, who you are. Like that's the thing that I think eludes a lot of people is that, man, every year the team is different. You know, the strengths are different. The weaknesses are different. You know, guys are getting older. Younger guys are coming, you know, so great coaches kind of can evolve on the fly. And that's kind of what you're seeing with the Bucs. They're having to evolve in certain ways on the fly.
Now, looking at this wide receiver room, we had mentioned, Mike Evans potentially being absent for week 3. Julio Jones missed the week 2 game in New Orleans. He was a game time decision, kind of popped up on the injury report later in the week. Expected him to play. He ends up not playing. It is what it is. A lot of people saw this one coming because he has not really escaped injury these last couple of years in the NFL, but I almost expect him to play. But in the same breath, talking about this wide receiver room, I think it's way too easy for people to discredit a guy like, Russell Gage for not necessarily stepping up last week against New Orleans, but it's hard to do that because this offense always struggles against New Orleans. It doesn't matter who you have, who you don't have out there. They have been full strength and they still have a hard time putting up absolute great numbers at the wide receiver position against this team. But Julio Jones coming back, what are your expectations for this wide receiver room this week, Evan? And do you think Brady should hopefully find it much easier to move the ball this week against the defense that he has had some success in the past?
Yeah, I think Julio should be fine because it was a close call. I think if he's warming up, and testing it out pregame, that tells me that you were close to playing. It's just you decide, not to go. So you hope he's back, and if he is, then you're rolling with, Gage and Jones as your top 2, assuming that Evans doesn't play, assuming Godwin doesn't play. This Packers defense, though, is pretty good. And, they have a lot of talent in the secondary, Jair Alexander, Rasul Douglas. They have talent in that secondary with their corners, so I don't think it'll be easy. Dallas is I have hated on the Bucs offensive philosophy throughout the first 2 games of the season, right? I think the strength of this team is still a passing football team, and you need to play to your strengths. And that's why the Bucs are statistically one of the worst offenses so far in the league. It's no coincidence. But the defenses they have played in Todd Bowles' defense, in Byron Leftwich's defense, the defenses they have played have not been slouches. Dallas's defense held Cincinnati to 17 points. Dallas's defense is a talented defense. The Saints, we all know that the Saints give the Bucs trouble, but the Saints defense is also very talented. Now they have another talented defense coming in. The Packers defense is not a slouch. I think it is much better than the 2020 defense that the Bucs last faced. So it'll be a challenge, I think, and they're going to have to get creative. I thought Russell Gage played good. I thought he played a little bit better than some fans may think. He was wide open on that the Perryman touchdown. There was not a defender within 10 yards of him, but Brady decided to get the home run ball, which is fine. Just good it worked. If it didn't work, then you can be looking at that and saying, Gage is wide open for a first down. But the guy like Gage, you pay him $10 million. You're gonna have to step up. Julio Jones, if he plays, he'll have to step up. And these tight ends, man, they're giving the Bucs nothing right now. They are giving the Bucs absolutely nothing in the receiving game. And if Mike Evans isn't there, unless an unexpected wide receiver like a Scotty Miller, who was obviously had success against the Packers, or like a Brashad Perriman for another week, unless one of those guys step up, a guy like Cameron Braid or Kate Otten, one of these tight ends is going to have to step up. And Kyle Rudolph again was inactive. It might be time to give him a look, honestly.
Hey, you just got to keep living, Evan. You don't see what it's like to get old. And that's what you're going through. So Kyle Rudolph is old, man.
I know, but you got
Julio
a 45-year-old
Jones
quarterback.
Julio Jones is old. So, I want to give you guys this context with Julio. Let's just say Julio is on a pitch count this year, 425 pitches. That's what you're expecting.
Okay.
Which that comes out to about 25 snaps a game if he plays every game. So you got to look at it where do I want to get those 425 pitches? Is it better to get a 50 pitch performance in week 6 and miss week 3, 4, and 5? Or is it we want it to be a consistent 25 a week pitch count? Because when you get his age, you wear out. Your ability to perform at your peak is limited. So I'm a kind of person, I would rather, if he's on a pitch count, I'd rather save the pitches for third, fourth quarter of the season and have something left come playoffs then use him up, early in the season just to, hey, he's available, he's playing. Does that make sense? Like when you look at it from that context, like 25 snaps a game, 17 weeks is 425. That's a pitch count.
It makes sense. Not only Julio's age, but a player with his age, with his injuries over the past few years. I think the Bucs, the way the season ended last year, they truly believe, and a lot of people believe, that if they had their full weapons healthy, they would have beaten the Rams and they might have won the Super Bowl. But they weren't healthy. So I think their priority for this year is obviously, if Julio Jones is 100% good to go, they'll want him out there, but like they're gonna play it as cautious as possible because they know, like just like you said, in November and December and January, like those are the games. The later you get in the year, the more the games are gonna matter. So I definitely do agree, and that's why I do think Julio Jones was close to playing, and that's again maybe the Bucs are playing it a little bit more cautious with a guy like Julio Jones because let's say you throw him out there against New Orleans and he's let's say he's 80%, right? 80% good to go. You throw him out there against New Orleans, something happens and he's out for 5 weeks. And then you're missing him for 5 weeks and you still don't know when Godwin's coming back. So I think they were playing it more cautious with Julio. I agree that on the pitch count, I think he was on the pitch count, honestly, throughout this year. I think it's going to be the same way I think it was the same way with Godwin in Dallas. I think it just so happened Godwin got hurt, but I think Godwin was probably on a pitch count. And this offense, I'm not hitting the panic button with this offense because they haven't been fully healthy yet. And they've avoided those big time turnovers. They're playing efficient football, so I haven't hit the full blown panic button. But to me, it's just your strength as a passing football team. And right now, they're not playing to their strengths. Once they get healthy, hopefully they can. But right now, they're just not doing it.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is for both of you. This doesn't seem like a farewell tour for Brady. And considering this past offseason, it's surprising to me. I almost thought this would be like give Brady his flowers while he's still living, campaign. Like an NBA player, they announced this is going to be his last year, and he's honored at some of the away stadiums, and it's spoken about. Like I feel like that narrative has kind of been suppressed a lot, and I don't get a chance to listen to some of the local, stuff as much. Should this be like a farewell tour?
Well,
Is this his last year?
But before, I'll let Rhett take most of this because Rhett is local. But Brady has said like he doesn't really want the farewell tour, right? He said that last year when he was sort of contemplating things that he didn't really want that farewell tour, kind of like what Kobe got in his final year with the Lakers. He didn't really want that, so I don't really think that's what he wants now. I mean, that doesn't stop people from still doing it, but what is sort of the quick vibe down there, Rhett?
Yeah, I mean, in the back of everybody's head, you kind of get this feeling that this is going to be his last year. Everything dominating the news cycle the way that it has, with everyone having an opinion about Tom Brady and him just opening up and how much he's expressed his human side lately, not the cyborg that only focuses on football side of Tom Brady that we normally see. So, like, I totally get that feeling, but I think it all wraps back up into, just like Evan had brought up, Brady said himself he doesn't really want any of that stuff. He doesn't want people to know 100% that his last season is his last, because then that's all they're going to talk about. They're not going to talk about what he's done so far that season. They're not even going to talk about his team and where they are. They'll probably talk about this being his final game here, or his final time facing this quarterback, this opponent, this defense, whatever the case may be. I think that since they've already gone through the process of wishing him a happy retirement once, why would they do it again until they know for 100% fact that he is going to be done? Because that's also like the other thing that I think is in the back of people's heads, is that I kind of agree, Sean, in the sense that I don't know if you feel this way, but I feel this way. I feel like there is still a chance he could just decide to go ahead and come back for a 24th year. Like, if the Bucs win the Super Bowl this year, I think he's more than content riding off into the sunset. But if they don't, aside from these quote-unquote marriage issues, what is really stopping him from coming back another year? I mean, unless he says it himself, I think everyone wants to believe there's just as much chance he could come back as there is that he could retire. And that's why everyone's not so quick to kind of, throw the parade, I guess, is a way to put it.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think there's a pretty good expectation that this is it. Like, I mean,
I think that's the overwhelming expectation, but
mean,
I think people still maybe feel like there's a chance he'd come back.
I mean, you have Ian Rappaport. They're saying, in the morning of week 1 that this is his final year. So, like, I don't know. It's just, and we don't know. Like, everybody wants to speculate about marriage or whatever. We don't know. Like, and we'll never know. So I hate speculating about that stuff. That's his personal life. He deserves to keep that private. That's not up to us to know. We don't need to know. That's not our right. And honestly, like, to me, it hasn't affected his play. Like, has he been spectacular? No, but like, it hasn't. Like, to me, I'm not saying like, oh my god, yeah, he looks terrible. To me, a guy like Russell Wilson out in Denver looks a lot worse right now. I would be a lot more worried if I'm a Denver Broncos fan about how Russell Wilson has looked this season than how Tom Brady has looked for the Bucs. So, I would expect this to be the final year. I wouldn't completely rule out, right, that he could return, because with you unretiring, you never know at this point. Like, anything can happen. But I would say I'd be pretty surprised if he came back for a 24th year.
Let's wrap this thing up with some predictions. Looking ahead to the Green Bay game, me personally, I think the Bucs can beat Aaron Rodgers and the Packers with this busted up offense. I think they can do enough to get the job done. I think the defense stays rolling. Even if the run defense, bends a little bit this week, I don't think they break. I think they play a great game against Green Bay, and Aaron Rodgers struggles yet again against the Red and Pewter. Sean, what do you think the Bucs can do this week?
I'm just gonna play the under. Looks like all their games are going under the total. They're turning into defensive masterpieces. I don't know. I think Tampa, they'll have fresh legs because they'll be at home. They get to sleep in their own bed. They don't have the travel that they've had the first 2 weeks, so they'll be extremely comfortable. If I knew Mike Evans was playing, I like the Bucs. 7 to 10 points. To win the game. Without Mike Evans, maybe without Julio Jones, probably definitely no Chris Godwin. I mean, you start getting a little concerned. And at what point does the pitch count that some of these linemen are getting that aren't used to playing major snaps, where does their performance start to deteriorate? That's something that I think we have to watch. A lot of times the drop off from first to second string guys is not significant in a short window. Where it starts to get exposed is over a long-term period of time. So, that's something that we have to watch as well.
Couple of injuries.
But I like Tampa to win this.
Yeah, a couple of injuries to monitor. Akeem Hicks left Sunday's game with an injury, so his status still up in the air. Josh Wells left with an injury. That's your second-string left tackle. And Brandon Walton, while he was serviceable, third-string left tackle comes in and plays well. Can he do it for 4 more quarters next week if called upon is the major question.
Yeah, we don't know Donovan Smith's status. It's a pain tolerance thing again with Donovan Smith. I think it'll be the same thing this week. But Todd Bowles said today that Akeem Hicks and Josh Wells are both hurt pretty good. So I would be surprised if either suited up on Sunday. But we don't know about Donovan Smith yet. We don't know about Julio Jones. And I agree that I would be surprised. It feels like Chris Godwin is probably another week or 2 away from playing. So,
and I'm being honest with Chris Godwin. I want him to hold him out 2 weeks past, but I think he can come back because he's so important. He needs to
come back 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. At this point, just make sure he's 100% good to go. But we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, the Bucs have a lot of key injuries. The Packers really don't. I mean, Bakhtiari is still up in the air. Alan Lazard came back last night, so they have a few. But we'll just have to keep a close eye on the injury reports again, which seems to be every week at this point. But
every week, every city dealing with the same thing.
Yeah.
With all of that being said, that's just about going to do it for today's episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. Thank you so much for checking us out. Follow the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show and, of course, Buccaneers news as it happens. Speaking of Bucs news as it happens, you can follow my co-host Evan on Instagram at Bucs_Daily, the #1 Buccaneers fan page on Instagram. Check out his written work at BucsNation.com. Also, shout out to our good friend Shaun King for coming on the show with us this week. Where can people find you and your content?
Twitter at Real Shaun King. That's SHAUN. When I go to Starbucks, I don't care how they spell it because it sounds the same. But if you're actually looking for me on Twitter, you have to put it in correctly. On Instagram, it is at Coach Shaun King. So you guys, always a pleasure chopping it up, talking a little Bucs. You see one of my game balls in the back. So
what game is that from?
Let's see here. That is September 17th, 2000, Tampa 31, Detroit 10. Player of the game.
There you
go. Hell yeah. Well, thank you so much for stopping by once again. It is always awesome getting your insight. Last but not least, you can find myself, Instagram and Twitter at Retticus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. But that's the show, folks. We'll talk to you later on this week with our Week 3 game preview. The Buccaneers home opener against Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers should be a good one. I am your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off for my co-host, Evan Wanish and Shaun King. We'll talk to you guys in the next one. Until then, and as always, go Bucs.